Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 3 of the ALPS conference. I hope you enjoyed the evening last night, and congratulations to all the winners of both the awards and the quiz. If you're staying in the hotel, please make sure that you've checked out before the end of the morning coffee break. I probably should have said who I am. I'm Sophia Anderton. In my day job, I'm chair of CEO of BJU International, but in an ALPS term, I'm chair of the training committee and one of the directors. So yes, if you're staying in the hotel, please check out before the end of the morning coffee break. You can leave luggage in by reception. So I'd like to now hand over to Rahina Anand, who is chairing session 10, Global Challenges and Local Solutions to Equitable Participation.
Thanks, Sophia. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, okay, you can hear me okay as well. Great, good morning everyone, and welcome to the final day of the ALPS conference. We are PowerPoint free for this session, so we're aiming for some lively discussion to rouse everyone out of what might be some post-gala dinner tiredness. Not sure. It's great to see so many of you here, though, anyway. Let's start with some intro. So I'm Rahina Anand. I'm Executive Director of Global Publishing Development and Sales at PLOS, and I was delighted to be asked to chair this session because the theme of it really chimes with the focus of mine and my team's work at PLOS. And that work involves engaging with scholarly communication stakeholders across regions, across the globe. So funders, policymakers, institutional leaders, librarians, researchers, all of which to understand their barriers to participation in knowledge sharing, and through that understanding and through collaboration to develop or ideally co-develop solutions that meet their open science needs. So our global scholarly communication ecosystem still operates very much along narratives and structures that originated in the global north. But, of course, local contexts, local cultural contexts very much shape the local research systems that researchers work within. And those contexts, whether they be political, whether they be economic, whether they be social, all create participatory challenges along those prevailing narratives. So we're going to explore some themes around participatory challenges today, but not just challenges, we're also going to look at local solutions that our panelists have encountered or experienced or maybe even initiated in their own local contexts, or even their awareness of those at a national or regional level. And I see this session also, I wanted to call out, I see it as a nice continuation of some of the themes that have already come up in the Bridging the Gap community session that we had on the first day. So there were some lovely examples of local solutions for participation there and support. But also, for example, the One Nation, One Subscription session we had yesterday. That's very much a local and national solution to participation. I'm going to stop talking now. So I'm going to hand over to each of my panelists in turn and ask them to do a very quick intro to who they are, their organisation and their role. You can read more about them in the programme. So Susan, do you want to start?
Thank you very much. So good morning. As you heard, I'm Susan Veldman. I'm the Director of the Scholarly Publishing Programme at the Academy of Sciences of South Africa. We like to see ourselves in our programme as master of many, because this program is really an amalgamation of many projects, etc. So we're very proud to say that we are the hosts for the Cielo South Africa collection, which hosts about 117 journals currently. But we do a other wide variety of activities. We also do research on research in South Africa. So we look what our authors are up to and our editors specifically. And you'll be surprised what we discover through our bibliometric analysis. They are up to some nonsense, so to speak. But they do not like it, but we have a very weird subsidy system in South Africa that rewards authors to publish in accredited journals. So we have to ensure not only to up the productivity, but certainly to look at the quality of these projects as well. We publish the South African Journal of Science. We also have a science engagement, science outreach magazine for grade 10 to 12 learners, which is the Quest magazine. And we also host a couple of journals, 17 of them, who cannot afford to actually host themselves onto an electronic platform. So we do quite a bit of work there. And then we talk about communities just the other day. So we have a National Scholarly Editors Forum, and that's very important. And we have a National Scholarly Book Publishers Forum. And in that way, we actually engage with our community. Just for interest, we publish, South Africa published 372 regional journals, which is quite a bit for South Africa. And we evaluate them regularly, and we even motivate them to sometimes merge. Not that they like that, but certainly it's a very large amount of journals for actually a tiny research sort of group of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Al-Walid.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Al-Walid. I'm the head of open access and copyright at Qatar National Library, and I'm very happy to be here today. So I wear different kind of hats at QNL, working with open access. Responsible for the open access program, which looks at basically all the read and publish agreements and publishing agreements in general. The Open Access Fund, where we support, it's a national service where we support researchers in Qatar to publish open access by covering the APCs for them. And of course, everything to do with outreach when it comes to open access. I'm also responsible for copyright, everything from copyright policy to ensuring open heritage in the National Library and dealing with everything copyright related, especially telling people you can't do this, which I'm not very popular sometimes in the library. But when it comes to publishing, yeah, we deal with basically APCs, the publishing, and of course, in our perspective, we have several challenges. In the last 8 years, we've been able to do a lot. So basically, we fund about 1,000 articles a year, which is about like 25–30% of all output in Qatar. Of course, Qatar is quite small and has a small output. Of course, we have challenges, and I look forward to discussing kind of challenges and opportunities today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sarah Francis Gordon. I'm the executive editor of Psicología Iberoamericana, a diamond open access journal in the field of psychology at the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City, Mexico. We publish articles in Spanish and English. I'm originally from South Africa. I trained in psychology. I have a doctorate in psychology and a postdoctorate in political science. I oversee the journal's full publishing workflow, manage our open journal system, and also teach undergraduate and postgraduate classes in English and Spanish in psychology. My work primarily focuses on promoting inclusive, bilingual, open access publishing, addressing structural and linguistic inequities, and supporting equitable participation in the global scholarly ecosystem. And I'm very happy to be here today with all of you and to discuss the challenges that we confront in scholarly publishing.
Thanks, Sarah. So already we've got some lovely broad experience here, and already we're kind of unearthing some of those challenges or those local contexts that people are working within. So as I said, we're going to try and explore this subject via a few themes, but they're likely going to weave together. And we're going to start with publishing models. Good, bad, evil, all the above. So I want to know from each of you, how do different publishing models, whether they be pay to publish, pay to read, etc., how do they either facilitate or create barriers to participation from your local, national, or regional contexts? So who would like to start? Al-Walid?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
I mean, publishing model is something I think about almost every minute, which is quite unfortunate.
That's a confession.
It's maybe like, yeah. There's another word for that. So publishing models. Right now, we're obsessed with open access, and for good reasons. I think open access is the way forward. It improves readership, citations, etc. But on the other hand, when it comes to open access, we have to deal with the APCs. And besides that, the APCs numbers and the charges are going over, like increasing year on year, which is crazy. We face an issue in our context. And again, when I say in context, it could be Qatar, it is Qatar, but in many cases, what we face also applies to many countries in the region. Of course, the region, when we talk about Arab countries and Arab states, is quite diverse. You've got high-income countries, you have middle-income countries and low-middle-income countries, but we all face the same issues with the lack of institutional support for APCs. So I think so when the business models comes, it's figuring out how research, individual researchers can come up with the APC is the biggest challenge. But that's just the beginning, right? Even if we have institutional support, which is the case in Qatar, so what we did about 8 years ago, we decided not to have any subscription agreement unless there's a publishing element involved. And we're doing this as a consortium. So this is like the only consortium in kind of the region. And we've done that, we took that decision. And we thought that was great, right? So we have the read and publish agreements. And you would think once we have that, all your issues are resolved. You kind of calculate how many APCs and et cetera. But then, of course, we face other challenges. Publishers expect kind of historical payment. Whatever revenue they have on their checklist, they still expect that, plus 5 to 10% year-on-year growth. The other thing is that once we sign the agreement, you think everything is resolved. But again, to get to that stage, we've also faced the issue where there isn't much transparency when it comes to licensing agreements. And what we know is that an agreement that we get is different from our neighbors, different from, let's say, in Europe, different from Africa. And that's an issue in publishing. So luckily, we rely on the ESAC registry, so the OA 2020 and the Max Planck, where we look at the agreements and try to figure out. But then we're told, yeah, but this is not for you. So this is what publishers sometimes tell us. You can't take a model and apply it to you. But again, so it's just a whole spectrum of issues. So even when we have to kind of figure out the agreements, we deal with workflows and kind of deal with issues there. So I think with the business model, the core is figure out APCs and how to kind of manage that and get as much possible. But then that's just the beginning. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm. So. Thanks, Al-Walid. Sarah, you mentioned the D word, diamond.
Okay.
The D word is?
Sorry, diamond.
Diamond, yes. I'm the executive editor of a Diamond open access journal, often framed of the enemy of journals as opposed to the pay for read model, no. But the truth is that in Mexico and Latin America, researchers are being priced out of publishing because the price that big publishers want for you to publish open access is exorbitant for us. It is exorbitant. And so normally in Latin America, in Mexico, at the beginning of the year, you sit with your academic departments and you tell them, I plan to publish 3 papers this year. I think this is how much it will cost. And then we take the budget and we try to fit as many people. And every year the budget gets cut. So some people can't publish their articles in open access forums. Sometimes they have to choose to publish it in a closed access forum. So in that sense, this idea of high APCs to be able to publish open access is not working in Latin America. It's not working in Mexico. The researchers, they're being actually priced out of the market because though Mexico is considered a middle to upper income country, they don't get the same discounts as you would if you were from an LDC, a lower developing country. For example, Mozambique is one. So we have a situation where researchers have limited funds in Mexico, despite the country is being the 15th strongest economy in the world, but they do not have the resources to pay these APC funds. However, we also have research assessment structures that reward researchers for publishing in high impact English-only journals. So in my case, so in Mexico, which is the 3rd country in Latin America to have an open science framework where we believe that research should be open access, all the journals are open access. My journal is Diamond Open Access. We don't charge an APC. In Mexico, the way the journal systems work is that they are housed at universities, institutions, and that institution or university will cover the cost for those employees and the costs of the publishing. But we're also facing a system where, as a Diamond Open Access journal, we're struggling in a sense because researchers in Mexico want to publish their best work in high impact English-only journals. so they can get more incentives from the university, and then they want to publish, you know, the rest, what they have left, in regional journals in Spanish. So also we have a situation where almost the researcher is being divorced from the local context.
Thanks, Sarah. So there's a couple of themes coming out there as well. Obviously, the research assessment system and how that provides incentives, perverse incentives, or doesn't provide the right incentives to publish in the way that authors or researchers might want. Susan, let's come to you now, and then we'll kind of pick up on some of those themes as
Sure,
well.
thank you. So if I speak about sort of transformative agreements, it's based on the experience that I had when I was still the manager of the South African National Library and Information Consortium. So the problem there is, and it was mentioned yesterday in the one subscription, is that you actually exclude quite a number of communities like research institutions, etc. And that's sometimes viewed by the publishers as being research institutions which are better funded than higher education institutions, and that was already then just enhancing the divide. So the consortium in South Africa is an opt-in and an opt-out model. So if you want to be in, welcome, but if you don't, you can just step out of the deal. If I look at it from an ASIF perspective, you know, we don't subscribe to any database. It's just too expensive for us. So I have to beg and to borrow from my colleagues in universities to please, sometimes when we do research, is to actually have access to information. So all these transformative agreements, it's still creating and enhancing this divide. Because it does not allow us to participate freely. So it is highly problematic still, but it's not in our remit of the Academy as such. Diamond Open Access is a very interesting one. If we look at journals in Africa, if they do not have a print-based sort of journal, then it's very difficult to sustain their activities. So they're still very heavily print-based. They sell their subscriptions to whoever is interested. For us in South Africa, we do not have an overarching fund that would help us in terms of our journals to fund them, etc. So we still pretty much follow a hybrid model. So we do have Diamond Open Access journals, and then, of course, we have a Gold Open Access journals. Of this 272 journals being published in South Africa, half of them is open access with the hybrid model, either being Diamond or Gold Open Access. So for the moment, that is still the best philosophy we can follow, is to try and at least push the open access, open science agenda, if we want to make way for at least open science. But whilst we're sort of also looking at our local journals, how they can fund themselves. But what is very interesting, and that is unethical practices starting to emerge, even with local APCs. So we can see that there are some commercial open access publishers that's starting to push the APCs into some higher brackets, which is most concerning. So that in our next round of work with our publishers and with our editors, we'll start addressing that. So it's going to be quite something. I don't think it will go down very well, because it's still their sort of their sole income, but still it's getting out of hand at the moment. Thank you. So that's in terms of that, and I think maybe in our next sort of question we'll start addressing the research assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Al-Walid had a follow-up as well.
Yeah, I'd like to just comment on Diamond Publishing in our perspective. So we've tried it. Before working in the library, I used to work for a publisher in Qatar, and we've tried it, but we call it sponsored journals, right? We didn't call it Diamond journals at the time. And that experiment didn't work. And I think what's missing there is kind of this business literacy, is that, you know, running it's basically a business. It's non-profit at the time, but still, like, you have to figure out your profit, or not profit, but your losses and kind of expenses. And that was the biggest issue. And for me, I would love for Diamond Publishing to work, but I would also love for somebody to come and say, here's how you can make it work. And I think many publishers in the region don't know how to do that. And I was in the unfortunate kind of position where I had to go talk with editors-in-chief, like 6 of them, saying, well, if institution cannot continue paying for this, we'll have to close the journal. And we've done that. We've archived, I think, 6 or 8 journals because of kind of the sustainability model isn't there. Diamond has a promise, kind of potential for it to work, but I think the core issue is the business model. We need to figure out how to make it work.
Thank you. Sarah, did you want to?
Yes.
Yeah.
As we were discussing yesterday in the session with my colleague from Brazil, they were discussing, so in Brazil we have cielo or silo, depending on how you pronounce it. And in Mexico we also have cielo and we have red league. And one of the ways that, because the government has an open science framework, even though we have a research assessment center, CONACYT in Mexico, CONACYT in Argentina, even though we have a research assessments structure that incentivizes and rewards you if you publish in high-impact English-only journals, we have a national framework that is committed to open science. So one of the ways that Mexico has done it, and also in Brazil, is that they have invested in open science infrastructure. So one practical example is Redeleak, which invested in Markaleak Redeleak, which is an open source XML JATS coding system that journal editors can learn how to do. It's a platform and they can code their articles so at the end it is in formats of XML, JATS, it's in PDF, HTML, XML, Visor, XML, mobile, and so resources like that, investing in open access infrastructure works. But again, we have the problem. Someone has to pay for this, no? So when you have a country that has a commitment, a legislation towards open science framework, obviously the money for this is coming from our governments, and so funding is set aside for open access infrastructure. So it is difficult to sustain Diamond. It is true that it is difficult to sustain Diamond open access journals in countries that do not have a commitment to an open science framework. So yes, you have a point in that regard.
Susan, did you want to?
Yes, please, and it's on Diamond Open Access. And that is that I have a sort of an internal conflict, and you're welcome to convince me and to talk to me to at least come to the party, so to speak. And that is, I think that's the main reason why we chose Cielo South Africa. It's the whole issue of quality. Because what concerns me a little bit about Diamond Open Access journals is that people think that they can just start a journal and they can just dump it onto an open access platform, and if they make it available for the rest of the world. And we've got to be very careful, especially where we are in developing countries. And we are under scrutiny, and we are under sort of questionable and untrusted sort of information. So we have to make very sure that whatever we put out there, the footprint on the internet is extremely large. It's that it's of particular quality and that we are proud to sort of be associated with that. So that's a concern I have in Diamond Open Access, because I can see currently in my country there's a push for an Africa Open Science platform, which is fine and good. I do support it in principle, but for me it's the question of quality. If we look at Cielo South Africa, there's a whole methodology before you can actually add a journal onto the platform. As I said, of the 300 odd or whatever South African journals, half of it is open access. So let's say 150, and only 115 is on our platform. And why is that? Because we get a lot of push from government to add more open access journals. It's because they're not of quality, according to our methodology. So I just want to bring in the point of quality as well, and to be careful. We have to ensure that we have trusted repositories. And how do we ensure that we can trust that repository?
Okay. Let's come on to incentives. You know, there's a few places national frameworks or open science policies have come up. Let's also not forget about books as appropriate. We don't want to just focus on journals. So Sarah, you referenced, obviously, there are many national open science frameworks, I think across Latin America, and that has pros and cons, obviously, as we're saying. What about from the South African viewpoint? There was a national open science in policy and development.
Yes, yeah, that's a good one, yes. So there is one, And
Yeah.
currently it's sitting at the desk of our Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation to present to Parliament. So in the absence of an open science framework, there's no governmental or overarching acknowledgement of the importance of open science. There's nothing wrong with the framework. It's a fantastic framework. It's very encompassive. But we need that hook. I've been busy with open access right from the start. And if I just see the progress, it has been slow, it has been a battle. And since I've been at the Academy, which is 15 years, again, it's been slow, it's been a battle. But we stand strong. We advocate for open science wherever we go. I think we're just about the only organization that promotes it as heavily as we do. But it's problematic. We need that hook that we can hook all our activities to. But that then brings about that there's no incentivization for participation in open science. And we're not talking about a monetary incentivization necessarily. We're just talking about evaluation systems and research assessments that acknowledges it some way or another. There are many ways to acknowledge it. But there are some slight little flickers of light happening out there. And that is that we have two institutions in South Africa that is very outspoken about not supporting the rankings of universities. So that is a good start. And in about a month's time, we're having actually a webinar about this to see why did they do that? Because you can imagine they're under a lot of scrutiny and criticism because we still pursue high impact factors, citation rates, H-index, whatever. So it's quite problematic. And then, of course, our National Research Foundation has started with the impact framework. So they ask the question, what impact does your research has on the society? So if we look at the UNESCO recommendation where there's a very strong sort of value and principle system, it's starting to address open science in a roundabout way. But, so it hasn't been rolled out for all subject fields, but certainly there are some subject fields where the question are being asked. So what does your research mean for the society? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big step forward. We might build on that particular principles. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So national, obviously we're coming onto some themes now where there's incentive systems, where they are, where they aren't, and how that can either encourage or facilitate some publishing behaviours or not. I mean, I think you mentioned quality earlier, Susan, and actually some of this is still against a backdrop of perceptions around quality of open science,
Yes.
and suspicion, if you like, of open access as well.
Indeed.
And there's also a theme around, I think, ownership of knowledge, IP, copyright, and Al-Walid, since you have lots of experience of copyright matters. Where does that fit in the whole?
So, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, Open Access Week is coming up, and that's the theme. Who owns our knowledge? So, I want to mention something from when we deal, and we even say the Qatar National Library. We're a national library, so it's very odd sometimes to see why is the National Library funding open access. We're not doing it for we're doing it for so many different reasons, but the main reason isn't, let's say, because we support open science in like the pure sense. We're doing it because we believe that the copyright should be with the authors. So or the rights commercial use. Basically, what we're thinking of doing is have done is funded the articles with the criteria that it has to be a CC BY license. We don't accept any other license. And the reason why we're doing it is because we believe that once the authors have the copyright and everybody is able to use it, even for commercial uses, we see potential for different things that can be done in the context of open science. So one you can do is you can create open education resources. That's something that we're trying to do. Two is that as a national library, our incentive is that every scientific research article is a cultural heritage item and should be preserved basically in the repository. Having a CCBY allows us to do that. Another thing is by having the rights to your work and basically in a CCBY, we also see that there's a potential to translate all the works, because right now most of it is in English, that we can translate into Arabic and other languages in the region. So that's where we're very keen on protecting the commercial rights and the rights and keep it with the author. And this is something that's of an issue because kind of, I guess, copyright, understanding of copyright and licensing isn't that strong with the researchers. They want to get their work done. And what we see is many publishers would put maybe the CC BY and CND on the top of the list. So it's like we're trying to push that kind of agenda. So we really strongly believe that authors should retain copyright, that there's a kind of a freedom when it comes to open access in its purest sense. And we're concerned about some kind of the trends that we're seeing where many publishers, like the big commercial publishers, are going to more of a restrictive license. And kind of, again, AI. So we haven't mentioned AI so far. So
We
but there you go.
No. Let's hold that thought, shall we? We've started to talk about language though, and I think that's a good segue into what you were mentioning at the start, Sarah, as well. Do you want to talk a bit about that? And I want to then come on to some solutions as well. They're starting to come out in the course of our conversation, but it'd be good to focus on solutions where we're seeing them to more participation. But Sarah, talk about, if you might talk about multilingualism and sort of, the issue around that,
So we have an issue where journal articles published in languages other than English get cited less. There's research about this. We've seen this many different times. There's been research in different disciplines about this. And we need to acknowledge that the dominance of English in scholarly publishing comes at the cost of other languages. And it comes at the subordination of the global south, full stop. Because for one language to be dominant, there has to be a group of people who are subordinate. So there is no equity in scholarly publishing when all journals only publish in English. For example, I think 3% of Web of Science journals publish in languages other than English. So the majority publish in English. And there is no equity when English language dominates the scholarly publishing system. Because if it dominates the scholarly publishing system, who is it excluding? It's excluding the global south. And when we talk about the global south and the global north, we're being very politically correct because the global north is rich countries and the global south are the countries that they're robbed. So it is important that we acknowledge these things, that we are embedded, that the scholarly ecosystem is embedded in linguistic imperialism, in these discourses of colonialism, and that also our research systems, also our research assessment structures are colonialist in nature, even though in Latin America we have these open science frameworks. Our research assessment structures are still pushing us to publish in high impact factor, APC, English-only journals. And in the sense, that's incredibly, incredibly dangerous because this commitment to English-only publishing and just maintains the status quo in that sense. And through all of this, we are perpetuating language discrimination. Yes.
Is ALPS ready for a decolonization of knowledge session next year? Maybe that's the conclusion. I completely agree.
Yeah. So coming back to the point on AI then, does that help with multilingual efforts? But can it help? Or is it also going to hinder in certain ways? What are some thoughts there?
So my issue with artificial intelligence and language translation is that high source languages, so what is a high source language? It is English, it is Spanish, it is Portuguese, it is French. High source languages, translation is lovely. But languages which are not high source, what is a language which is not high source? Swahili, Japanese, Urdu, and it goes on. And those language translations, when you try to do language translation in those languages, the language translation starts to suffer. As well, there's a lot of barriers in AI when we look at trying to capture the meaning and the voice of an author, trying to capture that kind of resonance with an author in a language. So language translation is great for languages like English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, German, but when we start to change or we move away from Romantic alphabet system, then we start to face problems. So my issue with artificial intelligence and language is, again, it is reinforcing dominant languages and almost excluding languages that are less represented in scientific knowledge, which I think is, again, dangerous, especially when you are conducting research in local communities where you would want to publish those articles in that language. So that's my opinion on it.
So I completely agree. I mean, the AI translation isn't perfect. And when we talk about Arabic, it's not perfect, but it's getting better. So one thing we're doing is we're experimenting, as I mentioned, because of the CCBY. So we're talking with some professors at Hamad bin Khalifa University, which is next door to us. And the idea is that what we're going to do is figure out a collection, and we're also talking about humanities and social sciences here. So I think this is very kind of relevant. We're going to identify articles that are CCBY in English, and then going to translate them. Now we're going to be doing a mix of AI, kind of initiated translation, but with a human kind of review process. And the idea is to produce articles that are in Arabic, translate from English articles, and then hopefully look into whether we can do them as basically books. So basically each article is a chapter, and then we can compile them into a book and even look at the printing. And this is the experiment that we're trying to figure out. Of course, there's bias in AI, there's like limitations, but I think it still gives us an opportunity, and we'd be crazy not to try it.
Yes, can I just add? I absolutely agree with both your views, and that is very true. South Africa has 12 indigenous languages. So you can imagine the Swahilis and the Xhosa and the Sotho and the Zulus, that's not even mentioned in large language models, etc. So it's highly problematic, but what it does do is in terms of the use of English, if you write a letter, if you write an email, to respond equally and in a fair sense of grammatically that it's correct, So it does have those opportunities of, yes, there is a but I think we must also explore the positive side that it can bring about to equal the playing ground, so to speak. And to
Yeah, just also one more comment about kind of the limitations, because LLMs are basically modeled and kind of trained on what's existing online. So what we're trying to do is kind of trying to increase the number of local languages, Arabic languages online. And with the hope that this could kind of feed back into this kind of issue of limitations. So that's what we're trying to do, is push more online, and so hopefully AI can be better.
I love that idea. I completely agree. AI is incredibly helpful with the translation process, but as we were discussing, I think it was yesterday or the day before, human in the loop, communities in the loop. We can't just blindly trust it. We need to be trying to have more texts in languages which have been marginalized so that AI can train on these texts. We cannot rely on what it has at the moment, so I love this idea of the translation to Arabic, translation to other local languages. This is absolutely fantastic. And I think if we continue this idea of humans in the loop, this idea of bringing the community to AI, then we can really see some fantastic improvements in the language translation issues.
Thank you. So, what about other solutions to increasing participation or more equitable participation that we haven't covered so far? Whether that's publishing model related, whether that's research assessment and incentives related. What else have you seen in your local, national or regional context where you thought, actually that's great, that has helped to broaden access to read, to publish, to participate?
If you speak to South African, then you know that we have a very particular history in South Africa. So at the moment we are driven by transformation. And I think that's a big elephant in the room. So I'm going to try to be a little bit provocative and perhaps a little bit bold, and I will try and do it stylish. So, as I said, we are driven by transformation. So we as the Academy, we are an independent organization, so we're independent from government, so we can tell government where to get off and where to come to the party, to put it so blunt. So we had to align ourselves as Academy with this whole transformation strategy. And we have divided our transformation strategy in two parts. So sorry about the background, but I think that's critical to contextualize what I'm going to say. And that is, we have transformation in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of institutions. That is one of the biggest driving forces in South Africa in terms of research, in terms of employment, in terms of anything we do. So it's a reality. But we as the Academy have decided that we will focus on the transformation of knowledge, because that's also very important, and that's where we have an enormous role to play, and that's where we actually focus on. Just to give you an example as a case study, the South African Journal of Science is 120 years old. So it's older than the union that we were in, it's older than our republic that we're currently under in, so it has survived all the times. So all the editor-in-chiefs up to now has been white men. And it's only of late that we had a woman in that position. So all journals in South Africa actually project an imbalance in terms of race, gender, even disability. And epistemic access has long been recognized. And of course, the intersectionality of all these aspects are very important. So what does equity look like when English language dominates the publishing system in South Africa still? So we had to really think clever and creative, and I'll be fast. I can see you starting to panic here.
That's all right.
And that is, there's a greater emphasis on inclusion, on transparency, by expanding the associate editorship mentorship program. So we have 10 associate editors, and each of them have a mentee. And that has been incredible experience. We spoke about menteeship yesterday, I think it was, and we're practicing that. It's hard work, I must say, you know, to have somebody tag along and you have to educate that person and mentor him, it's quite something. But we've taken an extremely bold step. We even have an editor-in-chief's mentee. So it's no guarantee that that person will take over the editorship from our current editor, but still we are just closing our eyes and we are pushing forward with this. And then, of course, we have revised our inclusive language policies, our keywords and abstracts and summaries, and we have boxes of different languages in our journal and in our Quest magazine to help others understand what we're actually trying to say. We encourage them to publish in a local language, so that's not very often taken up, but we have had some cases. And then social media, we do it in multiple languages as well. And then we have many journal writing and peer review forums to educate and to assist young emerging researchers, and that has proved very worthwhile. And then we have a very conscious effort to diverse the reviewer pool and of course our editorial associate board members, etc. So that's what we do in short. So it's very subtle changes, but we have to do them, and we hope that it will actually rub off on the rest of the South African journals. Thank you.
That's a nice example. Al-Walid, Sarah, anything you want to bring up before we move to questions?
So, okay, so we're still driving for kind of the APC thing and open access. But what we see also, again, from a library's perspective, is that we have more repositories coming up, and national repositories. So there's one in the Sultanate of Oman, like a national repository. There's one in Qatar right now. And if we look at the number of repositories in the region, they're kind of increasing. And what we're doing specifically in Qatar is that we're trying to kind of address the infrastructure kind of issue. So if we look at a couple of years ago, there was only one repository at one university in Qatar. Now we have 4 and then one coming up. What we do is we have a national repository infrastructure. We kind of give them a space on that to set up their own repository. And what we're also trying to do when it comes to equity is When we look at publishing, we usually talk about, we haven't talked about books yet, but, but we usually talk about journals, right? And books sometimes. But there are, of course, other forms of publishing. And what we're trying to push for is the non-traditional academic outputs. And we're looking at basically presentations, posters, conference proceedings. We also, and it's really interesting to work with art schools, like we have audio files of a journey in the desert, which I think really cool. But it's on there right now. And I think having kind of infrastructure that allows and accepts and even encourages these non-traditional academic outputs is something that we are trying to see, and we're seeing it kind of pop up in the region. And it shows that, you know, there is room for other kind of types of publishing, and the impact is really great. So I think we can see the downloads, we can see the views, and people are happy about that.
Sarah?
I'm loving this session. I feel like it could be subtitled Discussing the Elephant in the Room. Things that we can do towards equitable participation, just a few ideas. Multilingual conferences. If we want to actually listen to the community, the research community, and talk to the Global South, maybe we should go to the community and have a conference in the Global South is also another completely valid idea, instead of bringing people from the Global South to the Global North to tell us what it's like. Other ideas of equity could be dismantling research assessment structures, although that's very idealistic, let's be honest. But all of this, what I'm hearing about the diversifying research products, open access books, pushing for open access data, pushing for open access repositories, this push towards diversifying reviewers, diversifying your editorial committee boards. These are all fantastic ideas, and I'm really happy with this session. I feel like it's going in a really positive direction. We all have some really great ideas.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions. We've unearthed some solutions. Probably have slightly different timelines associated with some of them. Dismantling the research assessment system might be longer. Still valid. We should try. So yes, questions from the audience, please. And Hannah, is there something on the?
No.
Yeah, okay, good. We've got a couple in the app.
Okay.
So the first one, Diamond OA refers only to a funding model. Quality control comes from process, so these should be independent. Can the panel say more about why Diamond OA in itself is perceived as an indicator of low quality?
Oh, I'd love to respond to that. I feel that we have almost an unconscious desire to discriminate against a journal that doesn't have an APC or is not in English. So let's be honest, a lot of Diamond open access journals in Latin America, most are not in English. They publish in Spanish or Portuguese or both. So we have this almost this unconscious thought that if they're not charging an APC, then they must be low quality. If they're not in English, then they must be low quality. So I feel like we also have this like almost underlying discrimination towards that issue. And obviously, just because something is Diamond Open Access does not mean it's low quality. It does not mean that the peer review process is not rigorous. Regional knowledge production that is published in languages other than English does not mean that it is low quality. But you are right that there are a lot of low quality journals out there. We see predatory journals coming up. Every other day I get emails inviting me to conferences and publishing in journals that I'm like, no. Okay, so it is a concern, but I feel like this perception we have that Diamond Open Access is low quality is related to that almost unconscious discrimination in regards of what we associate with a no APC journal in certain parts of the world.
Can I just add a comment? So in the plenary, the first day, I had kind of a light bulb moment there. Because we heard in that session the most successful Diamond journal, Wikipedia. And I think that's really a model that we could explore. It's basically free to read, free to publish, And of course, the business model depends on philanthropy and donations. Maybe that's something to describe. I don't know. It's trusted, so why not? I mean, of course, there's no peer review there, but but it is potentially a model that journals can explore. But again, I agree. There's
lots of adverts asking for funding immediately when you go on there, though. So the sustainability of it is.
But that's the thing. Diamond is a business model, as the question mentioned, right? It has nothing to do with quality, but it can work.
Yeah. Let's go to one from the floor and then we'll come back to the app, unless you want.
No, that's fine.
So I saw Godwin's first, down there.
Thank you. My name is Godwins Amochakwa. Thanks for very interesting discussion. Equity. Once I hear equity, my ears just sprung up. My question is, how do we facilitate equity and implement it to ensure that it gets to the local issues? But on the flip side of that, I want to hear from the panel, what are the challenges that you face in challenging global equity at the local level? This question might not make much sense, but we've talked about a lot of global inequities. So when we challenge them within the local context, what are the challenges we face there to actually get it working? Thank you.
Anyone?
I mean, I just say language. That's the first thing that comes to mind. We're research in the region expected to publish in these high impact Q1 journals just because of the research assessment and how it's worked. But English isn't their first language. And this is where there's a huge barrier there. And I don't know what the solution is, whether to have more local language journals, but then we end up having whether they're accepted or not. But to have kind of more equity, it should have more acceptance for other languages. And I think this is something maybe idealistic or not even realistic to say, but I think language barriers to get in publishing is a huge issue for us. I don't know what the solution is.
I just want to latch on what you said. Yes, language definitely is one of them, but definitely the push from even the global south to publish in high impact factor journals. I mean, if you look at the percentage or the rate of how many authors' manuscripts are actually accepted into a journal, journals with very high impact factor, is very, very small. Yes, there's a layer in our researchers that do get accepted. But I mean, for a young emerging researcher to get to that point, it's highly problematic, and they do not get that exposure. And that's why it's very important to have our regional journals up to a very particular quality so that I can experience the real world of peer review, of criticism, of how do you better, and how do you take it forward in a step way.
We'll go to Tasha next.
I want to start by saying thank you so much for acknowledging that diamond doesn't mean free and that there needs to be some money there somewhere. You talked a lot about infrastructure, but the thing that keeps coming up when we think about sponsored or diamond journals is preservation and how many of them have disappeared. So I'd love to know what you are doing or what you are worried about in respect of preserving these journals for the long term, because that preservation is part of making sure that research is treated equitably.
And I suppose that goes equally for books as well, to a certain extent. So preservation, who would like to?
I think part of being this, in the CLO network, it's compulsory that we actually do look at preservation long term. So we do have contracts with Portico, where we submit all our journals, so it's a dark archive. That's very important. It's such a lovely question because we tend to forget that. And like you rightly sort of alluded to is, they just disappear. But very important. And then it comes to quality, and maybe not of the content as such, but the technical quality of a particular journal. I think part of the branding a journal as being of quality is how does it look like to the outside world? Does it look feeble and uninteresting? Do you have DOIs? So you've got to tick a couple of technical boxes just to make it look decent and to be trusted and to know, you know, that you're dealing with a real McCoy. You're not dealing here with a predatory journal or one that will just fly overnight. So technical quality is extremely important, especially if you do a Diamond Open Access journal. You have to look professional. You have to be of worth. Thank you.
And if I may just, one point is that one open infrastructure that's relevant and very important is the Directory of Open Access Journals. Because what they do is basically assess all the journals, diamond or non-diamond, and make sure they fit all the criteria, whether it's preservation, and it's really important. So I think supporting kind of these infrastructures is really important because we need them to check quality.
Yeah.
So the Diamond Open Access Journal that I'm the editor of is more than 38 years old. So Diamond Open Access Journals closing down in Mexico is not such an issue that we have because our journals are housed at institutions. So my journal is housed at the Department of Psychology at Universidad Iberoamericana. It's more than 38 years old, and we make our journals almost, you know, the historical landmark of that department. And it is taken care of, and it is budgeted for. But again, the journal system is different in Mexico. You know, we have this open science framework. Our journals are housed at institutions, and they are seen as part of the institution. We have a writing committee, editorial board, an executive committee, and we have structures in place and documentation in place, making sure that the journal follows all the technical parts of quality control, so it is tightly controlled within the institution in that way. So it probably operates differently from in other countries, but that is, this idea that it is low quality is not such an idea that we have, because if the institution is seen as a high quality institution, then the journal is seen as a high quality institution because its quality is associated with that institution, with that university, with that research institution.
It's such an important point that you've raised now. Yeah, agreed.
So we have one more question on the floor. Oh, we've got 3 minutes. Ooh. Dan or Hannah? Dan. Okay, so.
Hi. Like everyone else, I've really enjoyed the session, and I've particularly enjoyed the discussion actually around language. And my question was sort of based on this, which is, do we need to move, we talk about sort of encouraging publication in less common languages, but does that risk actually siloing knowledge creation and knowledge thing? Do we actually need to move to a language agnostic format? Because I mean, sure, the big languages, as you said, Spanish, English, obviously, globally people can participate. And I don't mean just in the reading of it, I mean in the peer review, in the contribution. So do we need to somehow find a way, maybe through AI, maybe something different, to actually allow this to be fully agnostic, in that it could be written in Swahili, it could be reviewed by someone in Japan, it could be then edited by someone in France, because otherwise you are forcing the review, the interaction, the creation of the knowledge to be very localized, very controlled, and therefore I would argue that within that you're going to find the broader languages, the English, Spanish, Chinese, are going to be dominant simply because the global participation, the creation, is going to be more. So do we actually need to sort of fix this problem in a better way of making the whole thing agnostic, so that you can write it in whichever language you work in, and it can be peer reviewed in whichever language you work in, and it can be read in whichever language you work in? And is there an element here of we need to kind of tear it up, start again, and really define this using perhaps technology in a way that genuinely you can have global participation?
I think you might have answered your own question, but anyway, Susan.
Yes.
Ultimately, yes. I think in the idealistic world, absolutely. I think that's what we're trying, and that's what we're trying to acknowledge, is to be agnostic towards language. But now think about it. You know, how long do we have to pay attention to this to actually get to that point that we are? So what are the little things that we can do, that we can move slowly forward? Because it's a major problem, it's a huge problem. You know, if you step back and you think about what you're suggesting, it's major. But certainly for us, you know, we're trying to do little things, little boxes, little translations, and if we find an article, you know, in one of our local languages, we try and find peer reviewers. But that's pertaining to our country. It's not rolled out to the rest of the world. But so is many issues. We only deal with them locally, and we do not spread it out to globally, you know, for the rest of the world to deal with. But thank you, that was an interesting one.
I'll try to do this in 10 seconds. We have a really good example of a book that was published in Arabic, books, and it didn't have so many views, right? It didn't have any downloads views. But then, because it's open access, the authors translated it into English with one of the big commercial publishers, and in the first month had like 10,000 views. And I think this is also, again, it's a comment on kind of the language issue, but.
So Sienna tried to sort of circumvent that. They've got Google Translate loaded on top of the platform. Got a lot of criticism, you know, how dare we, you know, the language is very bad, etc. But it still gives you an entry point to understand the subject, what's it about, who's the contact person. It's a step forward. It's not the ideal, but certainly it's working for us.
Little steps. Well, that's a good point to end, and we are at time. So thank you everyone for your questions, but also thank you to my fantastic panel. It's been great to hear from you today. I think it's been a really interesting, wide-ranging discussion that's unearthed challenges, but also how we are seeing local solutions to some of those challenges in participation. So thank you, Sarah, Al-Walid, Susan, thank you very much.